The invitation to my parents' 40th anniversary dinner sat on my desk, its gold embossing gleaming under my office lights. Not my real office, the penthouse suite at Wilson Ventures, but the small consulting space I maintained to keep up appearances with my family. The dinner was tonight, and in exactly 2 hours, Bloomberg would announce my latest acquisition, a $80 million tech startup that would transform my company's digital portfolio. Not that my family knew I owned Wilson Ventures. To them, I was just Sophia Mitchell, the daughter who settled for running a small consulting business instead of joining the family law firm. My brother Andrew's text flashed on my phone. Don't forget 7 p.m. sharp. Try to look successful for once. Dad invited the senior partners. I smiled, adjusting my simple black dress, a custom Valentino without the obvious branding my family preferred. They had no idea that while they were building their prestigious law practice, I'd quietly built a venture capital empire worth over $500 million. The Mitchell family events were always exercises in status display held at the most exclusive venues in Boston. Tonight, my parents had rented out the entire top floor of the Beacon Hill Club. As my driver pulled up to the entrance, I could see Andrew's new Tesla parked prominently by the door. Ms. Wilson, the driver said quietly, using my professional name, my mother's maiden name. Would you like me to wait? No need, James, but be ready for some interesting news alerts around 9. The club's marble foyer echoed with familiar voices, partners from my father's firm, family, friends, and relatives all gathered to celebrate the Mitchell family's success, or at least their version of success. Sophia. My mother's voice carried across the room. A hint of perpetual disappointment hidden beneath her warm tone. Darling, we weren't sure you'd make it. Still busy with your what are you calling it now? Consulting practice? I accepted her air kiss, catching the scent of her signature perfume. Something like that, Mom. Well, she patted my arm consolingly. At least you're working, though. Working, she repeated, as if the word itself was somehow insufficient. Though I do worry about the stability of it all. Consulting can be so unpredictable. Before I could respond, my cousin Rebecca materialized at my mother's side, her designer clutch glinting with crystals that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sophia. Oh my goodness, it's been absolutely ages. She embraced me with the kind of theatrical affection reserved for family gatherings where everyone performed their relationships for an audience. Rebecca, I smiled, accepting her air kisses. You look wonderful. Thank you, darling. I just got back from Milan, Marcus and I were scouting pieces for the gallery. You simply must come by and see the new exhibition. We're featuring emerging contemporary artists. She paused, her expression shifting to something that might have been sympathy. I heard about your little business venture. How absolutely charming that you're still pursuing that entrepreneurial phase. Phase? I raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious about her choice of words. Well, you know what I mean. Most people eventually settle into something more traditional. More substantial. Like Andrew with the firm, or me with the gallery. Rebecca owned a small art gallery that operated more as a tax write-off than a profitable business, funded entirely by her husband's family trust. Speaking of which, Marcus just acquired the most incredible piece for our new summer house in the Hamptons. A Pollock, well, an exceptional reproduction, but honestly, who can tell the difference? I nodded politely as she launched into a detailed description of her latest acquisitions, half listening while I scanned the room. 3 tables away, I spotted Judge Harrison, whom I'd met twice at charity functions hosted by Wilson Ventures under my real identity. He had no idea who I was outside of these family events, had no clue that the mysterious Sarah Wilson he'd praised for her generous donations was standing 15 feet away, being lectured about art investments by someone who'd never earned $1 in her life. The key, Rebecca continued, is understanding the market. You can't just buy what you like, you have to think strategically about appreciation, cultural significance, the artist's trajectory. I thought about the $15 million Jackson Pollock hanging in my penthouse office, purchased not as an investment but because I genuinely loved the way the paint seemed to dance across the canvas. Rebecca would probably faint if she knew. Excuse me, I interrupted her mid-sentence about the importance of provenance. I need to speak with someone. I approached Judge Harrison, who was deep in conversation with two senior partners from competing firms, their voices low and serious as they discussed some recent appellate court decision. Judge Harrison, I said, extending my hand with a warm smile. Sophia Mitchell. We met at the Children's Hospital fundraiser last month. He looked puzzled for a moment, his eyes scanning my face as if trying to place me in the correct context. Then his expression brightened with polite recognition. Of course, yes. You're Richard's daughter. The one with the consulting business, isn't it? That's right. I maintained my smile, knowing he'd been one of the evening's honored guests at an event where Wilson Ventures had donated $2 million to fund a new pediatric wing. How did you enjoy the fundraiser? Magnificent evening. Truly spectacular. That Sarah Wilson certainly knows how to host an event, the attention to detail was extraordinary. And such generosity. Though I've never actually met her in person. Very mysterious woman. Keeps an incredibly low profile. I've heard she values her privacy. Indeed, indeed. Smart business strategy, if you ask me. Let the work speak for itself rather than seeking the spotlight. He leaned closer conspiratorially, his voice dropping. Word is she's announcing something significant tonight. Another major acquisition. The woman has an uncanny ability to identify market opportunities before anyone else even sees them coming. I felt my phone buzz in my clutch, a text from my CFO confirming that all systems were go, that the press release was loaded and ready, that Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal were standing by. Really? How exciting. Judge Harrison chuckled, clearly enjoying being in the know. Your father mentioned that Wilson Ventures uses Mitchell and Associates for some legal work. Small world, isn't it? Though I understand it's fairly routine stuff, the major deals go to the big firms. Very small world, I agreed, excusing myself as Andrew approached with his characteristic swagger. Making connections? He asked, his tone carrying that particular brand of condescension he'd perfected over the years. Good for you, Sophia. Networking is absolutely crucial for small business owners. You can't just sit in your little office and expect clients to find you. I'm learning so much, I replied with deliberate mildness. Andrew glanced at his expensive watch, a new Patek Philippe he'd acquired after his latest bonus, and made sure everyone noticed. You know, if you'd just swallow your pride and join the firm, you'd have access to real networking opportunities. Not just chatting up judges at family parties, but genuine business development. What kind of opportunities? He puffed up with self-importance, clearly relishing the chance to educate his wayward sister. Well, for instance, we're currently advising on 3 major mergers this quarter. High-stakes deals that could reshape entire industries. The kind of work that actually matters, that has real impact. I thought about the 7 acquisitions Wilson Ventures had completed in the past 6 months, totaling over $300 million, each one carefully selected to build a diversified portfolio across emerging technologies. That does sound important. It is. Just last week, I was in meetings with executives from TechFlow Industries. You wouldn't know them, of course, but they're absolutely huge in the artificial intelligence space. We're helping structure their next funding round, navigating the regulatory landscape, ensuring compliance across multiple jurisdictions. TechFlow was one of Wilson Ventures' most promising portfolio companies. I'd personally approved their Series C funding after 3 months of due diligence and currently sat on their board of directors. Their CEO called me directly whenever major decisions needed to be made. That sounds very impressive. The legal complexities alone would absolutely blow your mind, Sophia. We're talking about intellectual property transfers across international borders, regulatory compliance in 3 different states, tax implications that span multiple countries, securities law, employment law. Andrew droned on, clearly enjoying what he perceived as educating his simple-minded sister about the complexities of real business. I nodded along, occasionally asking leading questions that made him feel even more superior, more knowledgeable. Meanwhile, I caught glimpses of other conversations happening around the room, partners discussing cases I knew intimately through my various business interests, judges mentioning regulatory changes that would directly affect my investments, family friends casually name-dropping companies I either owned outright or competed with on a regular basis. The thing is, Andrew continued, warming to his theme, success in law isn't just about understanding the technicalities. It's about relationships, about building trust with clients who are making billion-dollar decisions. They need to know they're working with someone who understands the stakes. Absolutely, I murmured, thinking about the call I'd had that morning with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, discussing Wilson Ventures' potential participation in a $200 million funding round. Sophia. My Aunt Margaret's voice cut through Andrew's monologue as she waved from across the room. Come here, dear. I want you to meet someone very important. Margaret guided me toward a distinguished older gentleman in an impeccably tailored navy suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding immediate respect. This is Thomas Whitfield, CEO of Whitfield Holdings. Thomas, this is my niece, Sophia. She runs a small consulting firm here in Boston. Thomas smiled politely and extended his hand, his grip firm but brief. Pleasure to meet you, Sophia. What type of consulting do you specialize in? Business strategy, primarily. Helping companies navigate growth challenges, market expansion, that sort of thing. Ah, well, that's certainly important work. His tone was kindly but unmistakably dismissive, the way adults speak to children about their finger paintings or lemonade stands. Every business needs good advice, regardless of size. What Thomas didn't know was that Whitfield Holdings had been desperately trying to acquire Meridian Technologies, one of my portfolio companies, for the past 8 months. His offers kept getting rejected because I found his expansion strategy fundamentally flawed, his understanding of the tech sector superficial, and his valuation methods outdated. The rejections went through lawyers and intermediaries, so he had no idea he was being turned down by the woman standing in front of him. What brings you to the anniversary dinner? I asked with genuine curiosity. Richard and I went to law school together at Harvard. We've remained close over the years, built our careers in parallel, you might say. He glanced around the room appreciatively, taking in the elegant surroundings and distinguished guest list. Wonderful turnout tonight. The legal community in Boston is remarkably tight-knit. We all know each other, support each other's endeavors. So I've noticed. Your father tells me you chose not to join the family firm. That must have been a difficult decision, though I'm sure you could reconsider if you changed your mind. The law offers so many opportunities for advancement, especially for someone with your family connections. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another update from my team. I glanced down discreetly to see a message from Elena, my head of communications, 90 minutes until announcement. Media standing by. You sure about this? I typed back quickly, absolutely certain. If you'll excuse me, I said to Thomas, forcing an apologetic smile, I need to powder my nose. The ladies' room was a masterpiece of understated luxury, marble countertops that probably cost more than most cars, each sink adorned with fresh orchids flown in from Thailand, lighting so perfectly calibrated that everyone looked 10 years younger. I checked my reflection in the gilt-framed mirror, the simple black dress that cost more than Andrew's monthly salary but looked like something from a department store, the minimal jewelry that was actually vintage Cartier but appeared unremarkable, the understated makeup that took my stylist an hour to perfect. Everything was calculated to blend in, to avoid drawing attention, to let people see exactly what they expected to see. My phone rang, the vibration echoing off the marble walls. Elena Vasquez, my head of communications. Sophia, the press release is loaded and ready to go. Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Reuters, everyone's standing by. The photo release includes your professional headshot, the one that will make it impossible for anyone at that party to pretend they don't know who you are. She paused. You're absolutely certain about the timing? 9 o'clock sharp, I confirmed quietly, checking my watch. No delays, no second guessing. And Elena? Make sure the initial coverage emphasizes the acquisition details, but also includes background on Wilson Ventures' portfolio. I want the full scope of what we've built to be crystal clear. The scope is going to shock people, Sophia. When they see the numbers, the company valuations, the industries you've disrupted. I looked at myself in the mirror again, thinking about 35 years of being underestimated, dismissed, patronized. That's the point. When I returned to the party, I could see that dinner preparations were intensifying. Servers moved efficiently between tables, adjusting place settings and filling water glasses. The string quartet had shifted to something more dramatic, Vivaldi, I thought, and the lighting had been dimmed slightly to create a more intimate atmosphere. I found myself intercepted by Dr. David Chen, my cousin who specialized in pediatric cardiology and never missed an opportunity to work his profession into every conversation, regardless of context or relevance. Sophia. Perfect timing. I was just telling the Andersons about my latest research project. He gestured toward an elderly couple who looked politely trapped. We're pioneering new techniques in minimally invasive heart surgery for children. The implications are absolutely revolutionary. That sounds incredible, David. It is. Though of course, research requires funding, which brings me to something I've been thinking about regarding your consulting work. He adopted the earnest expression he usually reserved for delivering difficult diagnoses to parents. Have you considered specializing in healthcare consulting? There's real money in hospital administration, medical device companies, pharmaceutical consulting. I'll keep that in mind. I could introduce you to some people, help you get started with smaller contracts, maybe community health centers first, then work your way up to the major hospital systems. The key is building relationships, proving yourself with smaller clients before approaching the big players. Across the room, I could see one of Wilson Ventures' largest healthcare investments. The CEO of MedTech Innovations was actually here tonight, chatting with my father about some legal matter, completely unaware that his primary investor was getting career advice from a pediatric cardiologist. The healthcare industry is incredibly complex, David continued, clearly warming to his role as mentor. You can't just walk into a major medical center and expect to land a consulting contract. You need connections, references, a proven track record in the field. Absolutely, I agreed, thinking about the $50 million healthcare portfolio Wilson Ventures had assembled over the past 3 years, including investments in everything from AI diagnostic tools to biotech startups developing revolutionary cancer treatments. I mean, look at Andrew, David gestured toward my brother, who was animatedly describing some legal triumph to his captive audience. He understood that success requires patience, starting at the bottom, proving yourself step by step. That's why he's about to become the youngest managing partner in the firm's history. My phone buzzed with another text from James, my driver, media van starting to gather outside the building. Should I redirect them? I typed back quickly, not yet. Wait for the official announcement. Mrs. Patterson, my mother's bridge partner and social coordinator, appeared at my elbow with the persistence of someone who'd known me since I was 5 and still thought of me as that awkward child who preferred books to birthday parties. Sophia, darling, she patted my hand with maternal concern, your mother tells me your little business is doing well. That's wonderful, truly wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I can't complain. That's the spirit. It's so important for young women to stay busy, to have something meaningful to occupy their time, even if they haven't found the right husband yet. She glanced meaningfully at my bare ring finger, as if my unmarried status at 35 was somehow a personal failing that reflected poorly on my upbringing. Though of course, she continued, settling into what was clearly a prepared speech, marriage and family should be the ultimate priority. Career fulfillment is lovely, but it's no substitute for the security and happiness that comes from a good husband and children. David, who'd been eavesdropping while pretending to check his phone, leaned over to join the conversation. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, career fulfillment is incredibly important for psychological health and overall life satisfaction. I see it in my practice all the time. Parents, particularly mothers, who gave up their professional aspirations often struggle with identity issues and depression later in life. How very enlightened of you, I murmured, checking my phone discreetly. 1 hour until everything changed forever. The conversation continued around me, a familiar symphony of Boston society small talk, David explaining child psychology to anyone who'd listen, Mrs. Patterson sharing increasingly elaborate gossip about various prominent families, other guests discussing their vacation homes in Martha's Vineyard and investment portfolios with the casual ostentation that marked old money. Senator Morrison, whom I'd noticed earlier schmoozing with the federal judges, approached our little group with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Chen, delighted to see you both. And you must be Richard's daughter, he turned to me with practiced political charm. I'm Senator Morrison. I've heard wonderful things about your entrepreneurial spirit. Thank you, Senator. It's an honor to meet you. The pleasure is entirely mine. It's refreshing to meet a young woman who's striking out on her own, building something from the ground up. What type of business are you in? Investment consulting, primarily. Ah, helping people manage their portfolios? Very admirable. The financial sector needs more trustworthy advisors, people who put their clients' interests first. He had no idea he was talking to someone who controlled more assets than most regional banks. A server appeared with champagne refills, and Senator Morrison launched into a carefully rehearsed story about recent financial legislation he'd helped craft. I listened politely while my mind automatically calculated the ripple effects such legislation would have on my various holdings, the regulatory changes that would affect everything from my tech investments to my renewable energy portfolio. Of course, the senator continued, clearly enjoying his role as the evening's political luminary. The real power in finance these days belongs to the venture capital funds. People like Sarah Wilson, now there's someone who's truly reshaping entire industries. My father, who'd been circulating nearby, moved closer to join our conversation. Impressive woman, from what I understand. Very secretive though. Keeps an incredibly low profile. Smart strategy, Senator Morrison agreed, nodding sagely. Let the results speak for themselves rather than courting publicity. I've been trying to get a meeting with her for months. My chief of staff keeps telling me that Wilson Ventures doesn't take political meetings. Wise policy, I said mildly. Indeed. Though I'd love to pick her brain about the tech sector, get her perspective on how federal policy might better support innovation. Her acquisition strategy is absolutely brilliant. She always seems to be one step ahead of market trends, identifying opportunities that others miss entirely. I thought about the hours I spent each week analyzing market data, reading research reports, meeting with entrepreneurs and scientists, building relationships with the brilliant minds who were creating the future. It wasn't luck or intuition, it was relentless work and careful analysis. From what I understand, my father interjected, she's built quite an empire. Started with nothing and now controls hundreds of millions in assets. $500 million, actually, Senator Morrison corrected. And that's just what's publicly known. The private holdings could be significantly larger. I excused myself as the conversation shifted to other business leaders, claiming I needed to check on something urgent. 20 minutes until dinner service began, 40 minutes until my world changed forever. I found myself cornered by my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother who'd never quite achieved the same level of success and carried that disappointment like a weight on his shoulders. Sophia, there you are. I was hoping to catch you. He glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard. Listen, I've been thinking about your consulting business. I might have some opportunities for you. Oh? Well, my company's been struggling with some operational challenges, efficiency issues, cost overruns, that sort of thing. Nothing too complicated, but we could probably use some outside perspective. Robert owned a small manufacturing company that produced specialized components for the automotive industry. From what I'd heard through family gossip, the company was barely breaking even, hemorrhaging money due to outdated processes and poor strategic planning. I appreciate you thinking of me, Uncle Robert. Of course, we couldn't pay much, you understand how tight margins are in manufacturing these days. But it could be good experience for you, help you build your reputation. I almost smiled at the irony. Wilson Ventures had recently invested $30 million in a company that was revolutionizing automotive manufacturing through advanced robotics and AI integration. The returns in the first year alone had exceeded Robert's company's total lifetime revenue. I'll definitely consider it, I said diplomatically. If you'd just taken the position at the firm, Mom. I cut her off gently. We've been through this. She sighed, adjusting her diamond necklace. I just worry about your future, dear. You're 35. It's time to think about stability. I thought about the stack of merger documents waiting on my real desk. The billions in assets under my management. The empire I'd built while they weren't watching. Andrew appeared, champagne in hand, his new Rolex catching the light. Little sister, still playing entrepreneur. Hello, Andrew. I accepted the glass he offered. How's the firm expanding? He grinned. Dad's making me managing partner next month. Youngest in the firm's history. Congratulations, I said, raising my glass in a toast. That's quite an achievement. It is, isn't it? Andrew's chest puffed with pride. Dad says I've exceeded every expectation, that I'm exactly what the firm needs for the next generation. You know, he leaned in. Cologne heavy in the air. That offer to join the firm still stands. Junior associate position. You'd have to work your way up, of course, but it's better than. He waved his hand vaguely. Whatever it is you're doing. I sipped my champagne, thinking of the news that would break in less than 2 hours. I'm happy where I am. Happy isn't the same as successful, my father's voice came from behind me, though I suppose small business ownership has its charms. I turned to face him. Richard Mitchell, Boston's most prominent corporate lawyer, looked exactly as he always did. Perfectly tailored suit, carefully styled gray hair, confidence bordering on arrogance. Hi, Dad. Happy anniversary. He nodded, studying my simple dress with barely concealed disappointment. You could have worn the Gucci I bought you for Christmas. This is more my style. Yes, he sighed. That's always been the problem, hasn't it? Your style never quite matched the Mitchell standard. The room was filling up with even more distinguished guests now, Federal Judge Patricia Henley, whom I recognized from several high-profile corporate cases, City Councilman Williams, who'd been instrumental in passing legislation that affected several of my real estate investments, the managing partner from Sullivan & Cromwell, Boston's largest and most prestigious law firm. My father's networking instincts were impeccable, even at his own anniversary party. Every person in this room represented some form of power, influence, or prestige within Boston's elite circles. Richard. A booming voice cut through the conversational buzz like a foghorn. Senator Morrison approached with renewed energy, clearly pleased to be seen at such an exclusive gathering. Wonderful celebration. 40 years of marriage, that's quite an achievement in today's world. Senator, so glad you could make it. My father beamed, clearly delighted to have such high-profile attendance. The presence of a U.S. senator would be mentioned in society pages, discussed at other dinner parties, remembered as evidence of the Mitchell family's continued relevance and influence. Have you met my daughter, Sophia? My father continued, his tone carefully modulated to sound proud while managing expectations. The senator turned to me with practiced political charm, his handshake firm and his eye contact perfectly calibrated. Of course. The entrepreneur. How refreshing to meet a young woman striking out on her own in today's competitive business environment. Thank you, Senator. What type of business are you in, exactly? Investment consulting, primarily. Strategic advisory work for companies navigating complex growth challenges. Ah, helping people manage their financial portfolios? Very admirable. The financial sector desperately needs more trustworthy advisors, people with integrity who put their clients' interests first. He had no idea he was talking to someone who controlled more liquid assets than most Fortune 500 companies. A server appeared with champagne refills and elaborate hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per plate than most people spend on groceries in a month. Senator Morrison launched into a carefully rehearsed story about recent financial legislation, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades in Washington power circles. Of course, the senator continued, warming to his audience, the real innovation in finance these days belongs to the venture capital sector. People like Sarah Wilson, now there's someone who's truly reshaping entire industries single-handedly. My father nodded approvingly, eager to demonstrate his knowledge of current business trends. Impressive woman, from what I understand. Very secretive though. Maintains an incredibly low profile despite her success. Brilliant strategy, Senator Morrison agreed enthusiastically. Let the results speak for themselves rather than courting unnecessary publicity. I've been trying to arrange a meeting with her for months. My chief of staff keeps telling me that Wilson Ventures has a strict policy against political meetings. Very wise policy, I murmured, thinking about the dozens of similar requests my office fielded every week. Indeed. Though I'd love the opportunity to pick her brain about the tech sector, get her perspective on how federal policy might better support innovation and entrepreneurship. Her acquisition strategy is absolutely brilliant. She consistently identifies market opportunities that others miss entirely. I thought about the extensive research process behind every Wilson Ventures investment, the teams of analysts studying market trends, the relationships I'd built with research institutions and think tanks, the advisory board of Nobel laureates and former CEOs who provided strategic guidance. My phone buzzed discreetly in my clutch. 30 minutes until the announcement that would change everything. The room was filling up with guests, law partners, judges, the elite of Boston's legal community. All here to celebrate my parents' marriage and more importantly the success of Mitchell and Associates. Richard, a senior partner, approached Crystal, tumbler in hand. Quite a turnout. The whole legal community is here. My father beamed. William, have you met my daughter? The lawyer? William asked. No. My father's smile tightened slightly. That's Andrew. This is Sophia. She has a small consulting business. Ah. William's interest visibly dimmed. How charming, William said with polite dismissal before immediately turning his attention back to my father. Speaking of business, Richard, have you heard anything about that Wilson Ventures deal? Word is they're announcing something significant tonight. I hid my smile behind my champagne glass. What deal is that? Some major tech acquisition. Sarah Wilson's been making waves in the venture capital world lately. Brilliant woman. Very private though, no one even knows what she looks like. My father shrugged with casual indifference. We handle some peripheral legal work for them. Small stuff, really. They use Goldman Sachs for the major deals. Actually, I used his firm for basic contracts precisely so they wouldn't look too closely at the CEO's identity. Another small deception in a life full of carefully calculated misdirections. Speaking of deals, Andrew cut in eagerly, unable to resist an opportunity to showcase his own achievements. Wait until you hear about the merger I just closed. Biggest in firm history, $200 million transaction with international complications. The conversation shifted as it always did to Andrew's accomplishments, his latest victories, his rising star within the legal community. I checked my phone discreetly, 25 minutes until the announcement. My mother clinked her glass, calling everyone to dinner. The Mitchell anniversary dinners were always elaborate affairs, but this year they'd truly outdone themselves. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across gold-rimmed china, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Each table had been set with 3 different wine glasses and more silverware than most restaurants possessed. Before we began, my father stood raising his glass. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. 40 years ago, I married the love of my life, and together we built not just a family, but a legacy. Applause rippled through the room like a wave. My mother beamed with genuine happiness, her diamond anniversary necklace catching the light as she nodded graciously to their guests. And that legacy continues, he went on, his voice carrying easily across the room. Our son Andrew, soon to be the youngest managing partner in firm history, following in my footsteps, building on the Mitchell name. More applause. Andrew stood basking in the attention, his smile broad and confident as he acknowledged the recognition. And of course, my father's voice softened slightly, carrying what might have been intended as warmth but came across as apology. Our daughter Sophia, who chose a different path. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken disappointment, the kind of pause that speaks volumes about family expectations and perceived failures. A small business owner, he continued, trying to sound proud and failing spectacularly, which is admirable in its own way. I checked my phone again. 15 minutes. Really, Sophia? My mother whispered from beside me, her voice carrying that particular brand of exasperation reserved for chronically disappointing children. You could at least pretend to be interested in your father's speech. Oh, I am, I assured her with complete sincerity. I'm just waiting for something. Another client emergency for your little consulting firm? Andrew smirked from across the table, his voice carrying just loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Something like that. The dinner proceeded exactly as these events always did, a carefully choreographed performance of Boston elite society. Partners discussed their most impressive cases, judges shared war stories from the bench, everyone celebrated the mighty Mitchell legacy while positioning themselves within the social hierarchy. I sat quietly, watching the time tick down, feeling the weight of what was about to happen settling over me like a comfortable blanket. Senator Morrison leaned across the table toward me, his expression earnest and slightly patronizing. Sophia, I've been thinking about our earlier conversation. If you're serious about growing your consulting business, I might be able to make some introductions. That's very kind of you, Senator. I know several executives in the defense contracting space who might benefit from your services. Of course, you'd need to build up your security clearances first, maybe start with some smaller state contracts to establish your credentials. 10 minutes. You know, Andrew said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, his voice carrying that particular brand of fraternal condescension he'd perfected over the years. The firm's junior associate salary is probably triple what you make in a year, Sophia. Just saying. Probably, I agreed mildly, thinking about the quarterly dividend checks from Wilson Ventures that exceeded Andrew's annual salary. I just hate seeing you waste your potential, he continued, warming to his favorite theme. You could be part of something big, something that actually matters, instead of just consulting. 5 minutes. I checked my phone one last time, feeling my heart rate increase slightly despite my outward calm. Actually, I said quietly, my voice cutting through the dinner conversation like a knife through silk, I am part of something big. Very big. Your 3-person office in Cambridge? Andrew laughed, the sound carrying across nearby tables and drawing curious glances. That's not exactly Mitchell and Associates. No, I agreed with a smile that probably should have warned him. It's much, much bigger. My father overheard us, his expression shifting to that familiar mixture of embarrassment and frustration he wore whenever I failed to meet his expectations. Sophia, please. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real business. There's no shame in staying small. 2 minutes. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress with deliberate care. Would you all excuse me for a moment? I need to make a call. Now? My mother frowned, her voice sharp with disapproval. During your father's anniversary dinner? Trust me, I smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of a perfectly executed plan about to unfold. You'll want me to take this call. As I walked toward the door, I heard Andrew's voice carrying across the now quiet room, just a small business owner trying to play with the big kids. I paused at the doorway, turning back to face the assembled crowd of Boston's legal elite. You might want to turn on CNBC, brother dear. Something interesting is about to happen. The confusion on his face was just the beginning. The real show was about to start. I stood in the club's elegant hallway, watching the seconds tick down on my phone. At exactly 9 o'clock, right on schedule, breaking news alerts started flooding in like a digital avalanche. Wilson Ventures acquires Tech Fusion for $80 million. Sarah Wilson's latest acquisition shakes tech industry. Venture capital queen strikes again. Wilson Ventures expands digital portfolio with major AI acquisition. Inside the dining room, I heard the first gasp, then another. Someone had CNBC running on their phone, and the news was spreading through the room like wildfire. Breaking news, the anchor's voice carried through the open door, professional and urgent. In a stunning move, venture capital powerhouse Wilson Ventures has acquired artificial intelligence startup Tech Fusion for $80 million. Sarah Wilson, the mysterious CEO who's built a $500 million empire, continues to reshape the tech investment landscape. I walked back into the room just as Andrew choked on his wine, burgundy liquid staining his pristine white shirt. My father stood frozen, his anniversary speech forgotten, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. On 3 different phones around the room, my face appeared on screens. The professional headshot my communications team had released with the announcement, captioned simply, Sarah Wilson, CEO of Wilson Ventures. Sophia. My mother's voice was barely a whisper, her face pale as she stared at the phone screens displaying my image. What is this? I took my seat calmly, picking up my wine glass as if nothing had changed. This is just another day at my small business. The room erupted in chaos. Law partners who'd dismissed me moments ago suddenly couldn't take their eyes off me. Judges who'd barely acknowledged my existence were now leaning forward, hanging on every movement. The careful social hierarchy that had governed this room for decades was collapsing in real time. Senator Morrison's face had gone completely white, his political composure shattered. You're Sarah Wilson? But that's impossible. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for months. I don't do political meetings, I replied calmly, taking a sip of my wine. Judge Harrison stood up so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair, his judicial dignity forgotten. Good God. I had no idea. The Children's Hospital fundraiser, you donated $2 million to fund the pediatric wing. The children's wing needed updating, I said simply. Thomas Whitfield, who'd been patronizing me about business advice less than an hour earlier, was frantically scrolling through his phone, his face growing redder by the second. This can't be right. Wilson Ventures has been rejecting our acquisition offers for Meridian Tech for 8 months. We offered premium valuations. Your expansion strategy was fundamentally flawed, I said with the same tone I might use to comment on the weather. You were overvaluing potential synergies and completely underestimating integration costs. Plus, your management team lacks the technical expertise to properly develop Meridian's AI capabilities. Dr. David Chen, my cousin who'd been lecturing me about healthcare consulting opportunities, was staring at me in complete shock. All that talk about specializing in medical consulting, you were humoring me, weren't you? You probably know more about healthcare systems than I do. Your ideas weren't wrong, David, I said gently. Just unnecessary for my situation. Wilson Ventures has a $50 million healthcare portfolio spanning everything from diagnostic AI to biotech research. Rebecca, my cousin with the art gallery, looked like she might need medical attention. Her expensive clutch had fallen to the floor, forgotten. The Pollock reproduction I was telling you about, I spent $12,000 on it. I thought it was such an impressive investment. It's a beautiful piece, I said diplomatically, not mentioning that the original Jackson Pollock hanging in my penthouse office had cost more than Rebecca's entire annual budget. Uncle Robert, who'd offered me consulting work with his struggling manufacturing company, was gripping his napkin so tightly his knuckles had turned white. When I suggested you could help with our operational challenges, for experience. You meant well, I assured him. The Wilson Ventures recently invested $30 million in a company that's revolutionizing automotive manufacturing through advanced robotics. The first-year returns alone exceeded your company's total lifetime revenue. Mrs. Patterson, my mother's bridge partner, was fanning herself with her dinner napkin, her carefully applied makeup beginning to smudge. Sophia, dear, all those times I told you to find a nice husband and settle down, that career wasn't everything. You meant well too, I said softly. You're Sarah Wilson, William, the senior partner, stammered, his earlier dismissive attitude completely evaporated. But that's impossible. Wilson Ventures is worth $500 million. Give or take a few million, I finished for him. Wilson was my mother's maiden name, by the way, though none of you ever paid much attention to that side of the family. Andrew's face had cycled through several colors, red from embarrassment, white from shock, and now a sickly green that suggested he might actually be ill. All this time, while we thought you were just running some small consulting firm. Yes, that was the point, I smiled. Though if you'd ever actually visited my little office in Cambridge, you might have noticed it was just a front. 3 rooms, minimal furniture, designed specifically to maintain appearances. My father finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. Why? Why didn't you tell us? I looked at him steadily, this man who'd shaped so much of my early life through his expectations and disappointments. Would you have believed me? When have you ever believed I could succeed at anything bigger than small business ownership? But. He glanced at his phone where the news was still breaking, new details emerging by the minute. You're one of the most successful venture capitalists in the country. In the world. Yes, I agreed simply. And I did it without the Mitchell name, without your connections, without your approval or support. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely. Every eye in the room was focused on our table, Boston's legal elite watching the Mitchell family drama unfold in real time. My father's carefully orchestrated anniversary dinner had become something else entirely, a public revelation that would be discussed in these circles for years to come. The firm, Andrew said suddenly, his voice cracking slightly. All those small contracts Wilson Ventures sends us for basic legal work. We're a convenience, I finished. A way to keep you just close enough that you wouldn't look too closely at the CEO's identity. Though I must say, your billing rates are rather high for routine contract work. Senator Morrison was still scrolling through news articles on his phone, his political instincts finally kicking in. Sophia, we should discuss how federal policy might better support venture capital initiatives. Perhaps we could arrange a proper meeting. No, I cut him off firmly. I don't mix family with politics, just like I don't mix family with business. That policy was made very clear to me when I turned down the junior associate position years ago. My father winced at the reminder, the old wound reopened in front of his most important colleagues and friends. Sophia, surely we can. William began, clearly trying to salvage some kind of business relationship. What? I raised an eyebrow. Start over? Pretend you didn't spend years dismissing everything I built. Pretend that an hour ago you weren't apologizing to your guests for my different path? The news alerts kept coming, my phone buzzing constantly with messages from journalists, investors, competitors, and suddenly very interested family members who'd barely spoken to me in years. I silenced it without looking. I don't understand, my mother said, her voice small and confused. All these years, living in that modest apartment, driving that sensible car. Because I don't need to show off my success, I replied. I don't need everyone to know how much money I have or what I've achieved. That's the fundamental difference between us, isn't it? You measure success by what others see and think. I measure it by what I actually build. Andrew stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need a drink. A real drink. Sit down, I said firmly, my voice carrying an authority I'd never used with my family before. For once in your life, Andrew, listen to your little sister. The one you thought needed career advice an hour ago. He sank back into his chair, his face flushed with embarrassment and something that might have been fear. Judge Harrison was shaking his head in amazement, his judicial composure slowly returning. The charity events, the fundraisers, you've been right there the whole time, haven't you? How did none of us connect the dots? People see what they expect to see, I replied. You expected Richard Mitchell's daughter to be either a successful lawyer or a disappointment. You never considered a third option. But the scale of what you've built, Thomas Whitfield interjected, still scrolling through articles about Wilson Ventures. The companies you've acquired, the industries you've disrupted. How did you do it without anyone knowing? Very carefully, I said. And by understanding that sometimes the best way to succeed is to let everyone underestimate you. Dr. Chen leaned forward, his medical training helping him process information systematically. The healthcare investments you mentioned, you've been operating in my field for years without any of us knowing. The AI diagnostic tools, the biotech research. Medicine is changing rapidly, I agreed. The intersection of technology and healthcare represents one of the most significant investment opportunities of our generation. Tomorrow, I continued, standing up slowly and smoothing my dress, the markets will open and Wilson Ventures stock will rise again. Your law firm will receive calls from clients asking about your connection to me. Reporters will want to know how the Mitchell family produced such a successful daughter. And what should we tell them? My father asked quietly, his voice barely audible. The truth, I smiled. That you had no idea. That while you were busy building your law firm and protecting the Mitchell name, your daughter built something bigger. Something that didn't require your help, your connections, or your approval. The room was completely silent now except for the continued buzzing of phones as news of the acquisition spread through social media and financial networks. I could see people at other tables discreetly taking photos, probably already composing messages to friends about witnessing this extraordinary family drama. Now, if you'll excuse me, I said, checking my watch, I have a merger to finalize. The Tech Fusion acquisition is just the beginning, we're announcing 2 more deals tomorrow morning. Wait, my mother called out desperately. Please, Sophia. Can we talk about this privately? As a family? I turned back one last time, looking at the faces around the table, my parents, my brother, the extended family and colleagues who defined my world for so many years. We are talking about it, I said softly. For the first time in years, you're actually hearing me. Isn't it interesting what $500 million can do for a conversation? As I walked toward the exit, I heard Andrew mutter, Jesus Christ, my little sister is Sarah Wilson. The whispers started immediately, excited, shocked conversations breaking out at every table as the news continued to spread. I could hear fragments as I passed. Been here the whole time. How did we not know? $500 million. Playing the long game. My driver was waiting outside, a knowing smile on his weathered face. Home, Miss Wilson? No. I checked my phone, seeing 47 missed calls from family members and business contacts. To the office. The real one. As we pulled away from the Beacon Hill Club, I could see photographers gathering outside, drawn by the breaking news and tips from social media. The story was already going viral. Mysterious venture capital CEO revealed at family dinner, daughter of prominent Boston lawyer, built empire in secret. Tomorrow morning's newspapers would have a field day. The next morning, I sat in my penthouse office at Wilson Ventures, looking out over the Boston skyline as the sun painted the harbor gold and crimson. The markets had opened an hour ago, and our stock was up 18% based on the Tech Fusion acquisition and the revelation of my identity. My assistant buzzed in over the intercom. Your father is here. And your brother. And 3 senior partners from Mitchell and Associates. I smiled, straightening the nameplate on my desk, the one that read Sarah Wilson, CEO, in simple, elegant letters. Tell them I'm in a meeting. They can make an appointment like everyone else. And your mother? She's called 12 times. Tell her I'm busy. Running a small business takes a lot of work, you know. I turned back to the window, looking out over the city I'd conquered while they weren't watching. Below, I could see the morning commuters heading to their jobs, the traffic flowing along the harbor, the everyday rhythm of a major American city conducting its business. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew, "Can we please talk?" I had no idea. "I'm sorry." I typed back, neither did anyone else. That was the point. Elena knocked and entered, carrying a stack of morning newspapers and a tablet showing social media metrics. The stories everywhere, Sophia. Wall Street Journal front page, New York Times business section, every major tech blog. Twitter's exploding with theories about how you kept it secret for so long. Any regrets about going public? She asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. I thought about it for a moment, about the years of careful deception, the family dinners where I'd been patronized and dismissed, the assumptions and expectations that had shaped so much of my life. None, I said finally. It was time. The acquisition calls are already starting. 3 major firms want to discuss partnerships. The Goldman Sachs managing director you met last month wants to schedule lunch. And Harvard Business School wants to do a case study. Schedule the Goldman meeting for next week. Decline Harvard for now, let's see how the dust settles first. My phone rang. It was my father. Sophia, his voice was subdued, uncertain. I know you're busy, but could we have dinner? Just family. No business associates, no agenda. I think we need to talk. I looked out at the city again, at the empire I'd built brick by brick, deal by deal, while everyone assumed I was just a disappointment who couldn't handle real success. I'll have my assistant call you, I said. We can find a time. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and reviewed the morning's financial reports. Tech Fusion was already showing integration progress ahead of schedule. The biotech investment was moving toward FDA approval faster than projected. The renewable energy portfolio was outperforming benchmarks. Elena was still sitting across from me, watching my face. You know, most people would be celebrating right now. Or at least smiling. I am celebrating, I said. Just quietly. The way you do everything else? Exactly. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong, I thought as I reviewed the day's acquisition targets. Sometimes it's about succeeding so quietly, so completely, that when they finally realize the truth, it's already too late to pretend they believed in you all along. And as I sat there in my corner office, reading the flood of news coverage about the brilliant and mysterious Sarah Wilson who'd been hiding in plain sight, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the best revenge isn't telling people how successful you are. It's letting them discover it themselves, preferably while choking on their expensive wine at their own celebration.